So apparently a lot of you wanted to hear me talk about Yen Sid. And while I'm hard at work on a much longer Ventus analysis and planning my next Undertale video, I figured I'd just fast-track this so that we can get at least one KH video out this month. Yen Sid is an interesting character to discuss because while he's not the most proactive character in the Kingdom Hearts series, he's gone from a fun cameo at the start of Kingdom Hearts 2 to a mainstay in nearly all subsequent titles. His use in the Kingdom Hearts series even impacted other Disney properties, from the official adoption of the Yen Sid name to his appearance in other games such as Epic Mickey. From the beginning, he's been depicted as a pillar of wisdom for the heroes to depend on, delivering crucial information to guide them on their journeys. Yet as I grow older and look back, I find that Yen Sid sits in an awkward place narratively, where the writing simultaneously wants him to have all the answers, yet has him withhold information for the sake of plot, or due to the nature of how these games are written. There is a fair bit to like about Yen Sid, but due to the sloppiness of some of the series' writing, he often comes across as negligent or far too complacent for his own good. And in this video, I'd like to discuss Yen Sid, the pros, the cons, and how he reveals the pitfalls of writing an all-knowing mentor character. While it might make sense to tackle the series in chronological order, I think it's important to look back at Yen Sid's first appearance as it was in 2006. In KH2, after a brief meeting with King Mickey, Sora, Donald, and Goofy catch a ride on a peculiar train and reach Yen Sid's tower. Though Pete bumbles around a bit, he's unsuccessful in turning Yen Sid into a Heartless, for the wizard is far too powerful and wise to fall to the darkness. A short climb later, and the heroes reach Yen Sid, and his first speaking role begins. Yen Sid is revered by Donald and Goofy as King Mickey's mentor, and he reveals that he was expecting Sora's arrival. In lieu of King Mickey, he hopes to impart wisdom for Sora on the journey ahead. First, he drops a book that contains vague passages pertaining to Kingdom Hearts, Chain of Memories, and potentially the future stories as well. Curiously, he doesn't elaborate on what it all means, so it's just a cryptic puzzle for Sora at best, with hints to the future, which would be nice for him to articulate, but instead the story keeps moving on as Yen Sid delivers more direct exposition. This includes a recap of the Heartless to bring new players up to speed before he discusses the new threat, the Nobodies, who are empty husks left behind when a Heartless is formed. But here's where the first troubling sign appears. Yen Sid, like many others throughout the game, states that Nobodies are beings that cannot feel and do not truly exist. He paints them in a wholly malicious light and urges Sora and company to defeat them at all costs. While this makes sense in that the organization is a grave threat to the worlds and their machinations far from innocent, when you look at the series as a whole, many holes start to form. Disregarding the fact that Roxas was already painted in a tragic and sympathetic light alongside Naminé, at the end of Kingdom Hearts Recoded, he reveals that when a Nobody and Heartless are slain, the original person returns. By defeating Xemnas, Xehanort's return is guaranteed. This never comes up in his initial exposition. You can chalk that up to the series being in its infancy still, and perhaps Nomura hadn't planned that far ahead, yet we know that Birth by Sleep was the next game planned due to the many allusions throughout the game from Xigbar, the original secret ending, and the new content added to the final mix game released the next year. The Doyleist excuse is that none of this was solidified at the time from a pacing and tone standpoint, and it would feel very odd to bring up. Xehanort's whole existence is a late-game plot twist after all, so mentioning him this early on wouldn't make a lot of sense. But from a Watsonian perspective, it makes it seem as though Yen Sid is deliberately withholding information that may prove important later. That he doesn't at least mention the organization's leader as a counterpart to Ansem shows an irresponsible side of him that I don't think the writers intended. That coupled with later reveals that Nobodies can regrow their hearts and the tragedy of many of the organization's members leaves Yen Sid feeling unintentionally cold and judgmental towards Nobodies, even if only by the necessity due to the stakes. He does explain why the Heartless are still at bay, of course, as well as the fact that even he doesn't have all the answers regarding the organization. This does make things a bit odd though, since he'd later act as though he knew far more about the situation in later titles, right down to suspecting multiple Xehanorts as the next threat. That, and the way he reacts when Goofy says that they'd have to get rid of all darkness in people's hearts to eliminate the Heartless, is also a bit unfortunate, given that the series had recently, and even in this game, suggested that light and darkness are part of a necessary balance. Other than that, Yen Sid is harmless enough in his debut appearance. He and the good fairies help Sora prepare for the journey ahead, and he even returns the gummy ship to them as well as instructing them on how to traverse the worlds and how their enemies are one step ahead thanks to corridors. He serves a simple purpose, and isn't overtly malicious. Within the original context of KH2 on its own, however, there are still issues with how indirect he can be while seemingly knowing more than the heroes at a given time. Unfortunately, this pattern would continue into Birth by Sleep. Birth by Sleep was the first game to really flesh Yen Sid out beyond vague exposition guy who trained King Mickey. At the very beginning of the game, we see Mickey taking a test before him, and when Mickey fumbles, Yen-Sid warns him that he has a terrible feeling before we focus in on 3 stars that represent the main characters, Terra, Aqua, and Ventus. Master Ericus later adds that Yen-Sid is a former Keyblade master and an associate of his and Xehanort's. While he no longer wields the Keyblade, he continues to survey the worlds via the stars and serves as an important ally and source of wisdom. I talked about this in my Terra video, linked above, but when Terra meets with him, we learn a few things. 1. Yen-Sid is pretty chill with Mickey despite him running off with the Star Shard against orders. 2. Yen-Sid is suspicious that Master Xehanort and Vanitas are connected and urges Terra to investigate while stating that he himself must not make assumptions. On one hand, it's understandable that he wouldn't want to jump to conclusions, but as I discussed in the previous video, it's a problem when he feels Xehanort has gone astray and doesn't voice this until after Terra has left the room. While it wasn't his intent, his words led Terra to Master Xehanort, and did contribute to the eventual downfall that Terra and the Birth by Sleep trio faced. To Yen-Sid's credit, though, he is one of the few adults in the story who genuinely respects Ven and his skill as a keybearer. He's very kind and doesn't order Ven to return home, even finding it amusing how like Mickey he is. When Ven goes to save Mickey, Yen-Sid has complete faith in Ven's ability, which cannot be said for Aqua or even Terra at points. The problem is that, like with Terra, he did not raise concerns about Xehanort. He did not warn Ventus, and surely he would have known about Ven's past with Xehanort. Surely he could have concluded that the dark magic interfering with his spells was either Xehanort or Vanitas. The omission of a warning again paints him as a far more complacent figure than the writers probably intended, even if he comes across as somewhat likable here. When Aqua arrives, he informs her of Ericus' death at the hands of Xehanort, and Terra. And when Aqua refuses to believe in Terra's involvement, Yen-Sid laments that he hopes this is true, and that he states the stars could have misled him. He states that there are some things the stars can't tell him, and it's here that I feel like one of Yen-Sid's biggest writing problems rears its head. How much or how little information he has seems to be based on the whims of the writers. The stars may tell him a ton of specifics, or they may omit info, and it's left so vague that you can see the writer's pen, so to speak. And given how informed he is of other aspects of the lore and meta in the series, it genuinely does feel like he knows as much as the writers need him to know, and can't know anything that would interfere with the stories they want to tell. But, once again to his credit, he shows far more wisdom at the end of Aqua's story. When Aqua's first impulse is to protect Ventus, Yen-Sid explains that Ven needs Aqua's belief and love, not protection. Once again shows that, for all his negligence, Yen-Sid could at least see Ven as a capable Keyblade wielder and urges Aqua to have more trust in him. The sad thing is, the interesting backstory of him as a former master and friend of Ericus and Xehanort would never see more development. He is completely absent from Dark Road, likely due to Disney not wanting them to depict one of their iconic characters in a younger state. While this is absolutely great for fan creators who want to fill in the gaps, it makes his history with the other two masters tragically vague. Some may argue that Master Odin is a stand-in, but I feel like that clashes with the way that he was depicted in Birth by Sleep and other titles as more of a peer of the two other masters. Thus, we can only look ahead. Recoded established the precedent with Yen-Sid going forward as the main mentor figure and his tower as a home base for the heroes. Starting with the end of Recoded, Yen-Sid reveals to Mickey and to the audience the nature of recompletion, that is, the way nobody can return to human form after the deaths of the Heartless and the Nobody themselves. This sets up Xehanort's return, but as already mentioned, it becomes a glaring omission not only to Sora, but Mickey as well. And it seems odd that he would leave out such a detail to his own pupil, though you can perhaps make a case that he did so in order to avoid discouraging Mickey from doing what had to be done to Xemnas. In order to tend to Xehanort, Riku and Sora are called to take the Mark of Mastery exam, and to descend into sleeping worlds in order to gain the ability to wake sleeping hearts. On its own, this setup isn't terrible, but I do have some major grievances with Yen-Sid here. First, the fact that he makes Sora and Riku abandon all that they have learned in order to learn the right way. Considering that trained keybearers like the Wayfinder trio failed to stop Xehanort, while Sora and Riku had done so twice, on top of all their impressive feats across the worlds, feels odd to view their abilities as lesser than formal training. I get that it's to justify starting at level 1 again, but it makes Yen-Sid come across as way more uptight about Keyblade Mastery than he was in BBS. Of course, the power of waking is important, and the fact that he is including Riku despite his self-doubts with darkness is still respectable. Most of his exposition here is harmless too, simply explaining the mechanics like the sleeping worlds and the Dream Eaters. It's just another case of the writing surrounding him being weird for the needs of the plot and the game. For instance, though he knew quite a bit about Xehanort's goals and intentions, and suspected what Xehanort may be planning next, he did not anticipate Xehanort traveling through time and somehow neglected to consider when Riku was possessed. He knew of Xehanort's Heartless, yet had to be reminded that Xehanort abandoned his body in the first place. It's weird, because there's once again this weird lack of consistency with what he knows and what he doesn't know. I'm all for giving wise mentors flaws and gaps in their knowledge, but the problem here is that the rules to what Yensid knows and doesn't know aren't really outlined. There isn't a set limitation to what he can or can't know at a given time, and it's not that easy to follow. It really is just down to the whims of the writers once again. And it's not that he's uncaring or written as purposely negligent. He does show great care and concern for people like Sora and Riku throughout the game, is willing to give Lee a chance despite his farmer ties to the organization, and even awards Riku the Mark of Mastery in spite of his crimes in the previous Kingdom Hearts games. He genuinely did believe this Mark of Mastery was the best way to prepare Sora and Riku for the dangers ahead, and the fact that Xehanort was able to hijack it all was treated as a flaw on Yensid's part that he genuinely apologizes for and owns up to. It's just that all of this really does raise questions and makes his actions in games like BBS look far worse because of his passivity, opening the door for Xehanort's treachery to reach this far in the first place. He's established as very powerful, yet those powers are mostly reserved for exposition and displaying holograms for said exposition. It's so odd because in the Fantasia short he originated from, he's shown with this immense power, and then through most of the series he just sits in his chair and strokes his beard. Granted, this isn't a problem exclusive to Yensid. Merlin, the fairy godmother, and other deeply powerful figures are reserved for more passive roles too, simply imparting some spells, giving Pooh's book or summons. Fairy godmother at least knows how to get to Quadratum, and I'm curious to see what happens with her next. Then of course there's 2.8, where it's revealed that he and Mickey knew Aqua's whereabouts the entire time. A lot of people hold this against Mickey for not going in to save Aqua, and against Yensid for not informing Sora and Riku. This can at least be somewhat justified in the story, because it wasn't fully mapped out during KH2's development, though BBS was in pre-production when KH2 released. And Yensid himself explains that he'd withheld the information due to the risk it presented. Add that to the more active threat of the organization, and you can at least give the man some slack. But what about KH3? Did they finally stick the landing? Honestly, Yensid's role is pretty much the same as in Dream Drop and 0.2 for most of the game. He gives exposition and guidance to Sora and the other heroes. He, along with the good fairies, provide clothing to allow them to better face the realm of darkness. And he, along with the other old magic farts like Merlin, contributed a space outside of time for Kairi and Lee to train. He's really mostly there for guidance and support, dropping reveals like how the original 7 princesses apart passed on their power, save for Kairi, and nudging Riku and Mickey in the right direction when they're trying to find ways to save Aqua. On the whole, it's mostly inoffensive here, though there's that valid criticism that he's a bit too hard on Sora in light of everything he just endured. But that honestly goes for almost everyone. For some reason, everyone keeps teasing Sora about his lack of skill or patience, and it feels a bit too mean-spirited for Donald and Goofy, even if Donald's been prone to playful ribbing in the past. Yensid does, at least, provide some reassurance for Sora throughout the game, and does show some faith in him, even where his friends dive into more relentless teasing. I think one thing that benefits Yensid's depiction here is that he feels less like he's withholding information this time. His role here is more utilitarian, and he shows at least some remorse in how he acted in the past. And to his credit, he does show up at a crucial moment with a cool callback to Fantasia, where he parts the Heartless Swarms to allow the heroes to proceed to Xehanort. It's just a shame that this moment follows a lot of the heroes standing around and talking in the field of Shadow Heartless, where the Heartless wait patiently for the dialogue to progress. KH3 has a really big problem with fight choreography in its cutscenes that makes the heroes seem less competent and makes the moment feel a lot less triumphant than it could have been if there was a more overt struggle from the heroes. And you know, throw in some Dark Sides and Neo Shadows, and maybe some Invisibles to keep it more interesting than the literal weakest Heartless guys. Come on. I think Yensid presents a problem with the wise but powerful mental archetype, not only in Kingdom Hearts, but in fiction as a whole. It's a trope that can be used to great effect, but one that just as easily raises questions, like why the mentor figure isn't a more proactive part of the story, why the mentor has specific knowledge on some things, yet completely gets blindsided in other areas. I don't think the writers intended for Yensid to be truly negligent or to mislead the heroes, or to have even had an implicit hand in tragedies like Birth by Sleep, yet retroactively, his existence in the Kingdom Hearts series raises questions like, where was he during KH1, and why didn't he help? If he knew about recompletion, why didn't he tell Sora and the others, and why didn't he frame the Nobodies as more tragic villains? If you just take the games at surface level and try not to think too hard on it, Yensid is a perfectly serviceable mentor for the heroes and a clever use of Disney history, but when you start to dissect his knowledge and passivity, it all starts to fall apart. He has his admirable traits, sure, and has even proven helpful in the past, but because the Kingdom Hearts series aims to be a power fantasy for young characters and young players, The adults can't be too actively involved, or it takes away from the young hero's agency in facing these huge threats. Basically, Kingdom Hearts follows a lot of shonen tropes, and while the more recent titles like Union Cross and Dark Road have deconstructed the child hero and how dramatic and exploitative that can be, the main series has only lightly dipped its toes in it. We'll have to see where the story goes from here, and if anything changes with Yen Sid going forward. For now, I simply see him as a well-meaning, but mishandled character with a lot of missed potential and inconsistency. But that's just me. If you have thoughts on Yen Sid and his role in the Kingdom Hearts series, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. This is only my second big Kingdom Hearts analysis in this style, so if you have any other topics to suggest on the series, feel free to leave those here too. My next video will be another Undertale-related project, as I'm juggling between branching out to series like Kingdom Hearts, while continuing to contribute to my main core audience that I've had for the past few years. I do a lot of other content, such as my Undertale webcomic, Inverted Fate, and my two Kingdom Hearts fic series, Antipode and Hurricane Heartbeat, which will be linked in the description. Antipode is currently undergoing a remaster of its first story, and I hope to start releasing that very soon, and will announce on my community page when the time comes. If you want to keep up to date not only on my projects, but participate in polls for video topics, get early access to video scripts, audio, music, concept art, and more, you can check out my Patreon. Every pledge helps me keep producing content as a career, as right now I only make enough to cover rent and a tiny bit of savings. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season, and Happy New Year! I'll see you next time.